We'll just wait for everybody to join and then we'll do a quick introduction. Um, Hello and good morning to everybody who's present here. Welcome to Global Travel Meet by Trawork. And I am here today in conversation with Sheree Mitchell. She is the founder of Immersa Global, a destination manager company for the destination of Portugal. And one thing that I think everybody is here for is something really interesting about her. She's a resident of Miami who has just returned from a 14-day Portugal cross-country trip. So that's what we're going to be here to talk about with Sheree. Sheree, I think what we can start with is a question that everybody has on their mind, including myself. Why? And how?
That's a great question. We can go into the details. I have a small presentation for you guys to go into the details, but basically I was interested in what travel looked like now. I think as all of us probably in this conference are. And I had the opportunity to put this trip together, and I had some support in Portugal, and decided that this was the best time to do it. Americans cannot travel to the European Union right now for leisure purposes, but luckily I can as a official resident of Portugal. So, being able to move around the country wasn't a problem. I was actually already here because I decided to quarantine in Portugal instead of Miami. So there are a couple of other things. I also wanted to encourage travel professionals and travel media, all of us who are here on this call, to do the same thing in their home countries and home regions when it's safe to do so. So I was very fortunate that Portugal is one of the countries that has handled the pandemic crisis very well, and it is still relatively safe, or it is safe to move about, and decided to take advantage and do it. And plus I'm just adventurous and I love a new challenge.
That'd be great. I mean, let's get into how you decided to go into it and how all the changes that you sort of noticed when you went there, the difference of traveling right now versus how it was when we used to travel before pre-COVID. And actually, you know what, let's take a look at the presentation first.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see the screen. Oops, let's get out of that.
We can see a screen now.
Okay, perfect. And okay, are we good?
Yeah.
And you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so the title of this talk is Did Portugal Get It Right? What I Learned After a 14-day cross-country road trip in the New Normal. And really quickly, just a guide to get us through this presentation so we can get to the fun part, which are your questions. I'll give you a brief overview of Immersa Global to just kind of give you some context on what we'll be talking about. Why a road trip? Why now? As we kind of alluded to a couple of seconds ago. And the details of the Restart Travel Cross-Country Road Trip. So if you were to visit us online, this would be the first page that you see in our virtual home. The type of products that we create and offer to our clients in Portugal vary. We specialize in culinary tourism, cultural tourism, art-based tourism, and faith-based tourism. We work with small groups up to 18 persons, and we provide single-day and multi-day programs. Everything is tailor-made to the client. So our company specializes in creating these products for mainly the American market. Our clients' average annual salary is about $95,000 USD a year, and our age range is varied, as you see. Our clients take about 2.5 trips a year, and their trips last up to about 8 days. That's pretty much the average. And the price point that they're comfortable at for that 8-day trip is $4,000 per person, double occupancy. So 2 people in a room, and they travel 2 to 3 times a year. And most importantly, the majority of them say they have no time to plan travel and they're always looking for something authentic, fun, exciting, and new. So this helps you to understand why I had the questions that I had that we're going to get to in a minute about the road trip and what were some of the questions that we're receiving from our clients in the US. So Pre-COVID, we defined new luxury as the ability to enjoy a curated experience without ever thinking about the logistics. And that also gives you a little bit of information on the type of clients that we work with, as well as what their needs are. We think that now we haven't had any trips planned because of the situation, but we believe that now people would define the new luxury as the ability to enjoy a well-curated holiday in a safe environment. So if you had the chance to visit us online, please also check out our Portugal promotional video, which is called Welcome Home to Portugal, and you'll see me, and I'll take you on a little 2-minute journey around the country. So why a road trip and why now? Well, for most of us in the travel industry, we know that there have been 5 stages to travel recovery, and this is information that we've all been inundated with on a regular basis. In the US, which is our source market, our clients are between numbers 3, 4, and some are around number 5. They have the desire to travel internationally, number 5, but some countries still remain off limits to American citizens. So we've been receiving a lot of questions from former clients and current clients whose holidays were put on pause due to the pandemic, asking, what's Portugal like? What's going on? What are the restaurants like? How are the hotels managing the situation? So once I received probably 3 or 4 emails of these same questions a day steadily for like a week or 2, I said, I think there's something here that we should explore. And just to give you a little bit of information about the consumer sentiment, travel consumer sentiment in the US, we have about 4 different groups. Those who are ready to travel right now, those who are willing to consider traveling soon, and those who will travel domestically only, and those who are not leaving their homes until there's a cure for COVID-19. So we want to focus on these 2. We also know, and this is a part of the thought process leading up to the road trip, what our consumers' concerns are about travel during the pandemic, right? We still do not have a cure. There's not a vaccine. Some countries are considered safer than others. So we wanted to get an idea of what's the thought process, what's the mindset of our clients. And after doing a little bit of research and also being involved in lots of conferences such as this one and speaking at other seminars, I came up with about 6 different concerns, or 5 different concerns. There's the there's the airport concern, clients still not feeling comfortable being in airports, the in-flight, actually on the plane with other passengers, and what's the protocol if masks are required or not required. There's then the in-destination concerns of lodging, restaurants or food and beverage experiences in general, ground transportation, and tours and activities. So I decided that we could focus on these 4 in destination in Portugal and have information that hardly anyone else has access to right now because no one's traveling. So then I thought, well, I'm seeing a lot of headlines about road trips. This tends to be a trend in the US for what they're promoting for travel options in the US right now. And that naturally led me to believe that a road trip sounds like an appealing idea, even for people who will start traveling internationally. So now we get to the Restart Travel cross-country road trip, the who, what, why, when, and how. I think you already know who the who is. So this was the little flyer that we used to promote the road trip. It's in collaboration with Visit Portugal, Travel Weekly, and my company, Immersa Global. And the idea was to have a journey to discover the new normal of travel in Portugal. So the objectives: discover the new normal in travel, share my findings with travel professionals and consumers, and encourage other travel professionals to embark on their own restart travel adventure in their countries when safe to do so. So of course, with any program or project that you have questions that you want to answer. And here are a few of the ones that I had. What are tourism suppliers doing to keep everyone safe and healthy, which is everyone's biggest concern, rightfully so? What are the tourism products like in the more remote areas of Portugal? Because in addition to that road trip being a trend that we're seeing right now in the US, another trend that we're seeing is that people are wanting to move outside of the city centers. And so perhaps the capital city of Portugal, which is Lisbon, and the second largest city, Porto, maybe those 2 destinations within the destination are not as appealing right now as we're still dealing with the pandemic. So I want to explore some of the more remote areas of the country. Are other travelers respectful of the new health and sanitation rules? That's also a very important question. And how has upscale travel been affected by new low-touch protocols? As you could probably tell, the segment of the market that we work with are considered discerning clients or affluent clients. And so they're used to certain experiences in destination, and we want to see how those have been changed due to COVID. And is it fun or stressful to travel right now? And is Portugal ready to receive discerning international tourists? So those were the questions that I kind of went into with the road trip. And here are the destinations that we had. Whoops, sorry about that. Let me go back. These are the destinations. I think I lost one of my dates. Sorry about that. This is Portugal broken up into the 4 regions that I discovered on the road trip, and started off down in the most southern part, which is called the Algarve, moved up to the Alentejo, and then went from the Alentejo to Lisbon, Lisbon up to northern Portugal, from northern Portugal to central Portugal, and then back home to Lisbon. So part 2, the findings. Once again, my focus were on those 4 in-destination elements that travelers are still concerned about: lodging, restaurants and food and beverage, ground transportation, tours, and activities. Before we go into the specific findings, it's really important to let you guys know that Portugal created a nationwide protocol or response to COVID concerns. Back in April, which was pretty early on, they established a clean and safe program, which basically works as a certification for tourism suppliers, hotels, restaurants, tour operators, and so on, to receive the certification if they met the standards for health and cleanliness sanitation, health and sanitation standards. So they will receive the seal, clean and safe, and they could display it on their websites or display it physically on in their businesses to let travelers know that that particular establishment had met the standards to receive this. And this is in conjunction with the National Health Department. So you're going to see that seal in a couple of these images, which is why I want to show that to you first, and also to kind of give you the context for how the tourism suppliers are responding to the COVID crisis. So top 5 changes for hotel rooms that I found. There's increased cleaning procedures. If you see the little Hilton Clean and Safe stamp, that's actually sealing off the door. I'm not sure if you can tell that's a door, but that's my hotel room door. Hilton is one of the major hotel chains that we have in Portugal. And of course, they have their own set of standards that they use, but this is something that we've never seen before. So due to the pandemic, we're seeing hotels basically letting clients know this room has been sanitized and is ready for your use and no one else has been in it. So once you break the seal, you'll be the first person in. Hand sanitizer everywhere, even given as gifts to clients. Masks as the new guest gift that you find in your hotel room when you walk in. Modified rooms. So some of the rooms no longer have the rugs, or they've taken out the decorative pillows, everything that can minimize possible contact with COVID infected material. Digitalization of in-room menus. So before, we used to have like a booklet where you can get information about the destination or even some of the services that the hotel offers. For the most part, that's no longer a physical booklet. That is a QR code that will take you to their online menu for those services and products. Top 5 changes for hotel food and beverage. Masks at all times. The only time a client is able to take their mask off is when they are sitting at the table and drinking water or eating food. You have to actually be engaged in one of those 2 things. Digitalization of menus, similar to what I just mentioned before. Strict reservation times. So before, maybe you could make a reservation for 8 o'clock in the evening or 8:30 in the evening. Now they are extremely strict, and some hotels will actually ask you to kind of preset your meal times even in advance of arriving to the property. Elimination or modification of the breakfast buffet, which is very typical here in Europe. So some of the options or alternatives that I've seen to the breakfast buffet have been no buffet at all, and everything is served directly to the table a la carte. One modification of the buffet that I saw was the buffet still existed, but clients were not allowed to actually go and serve themselves. They can go in limited numbers of clients at a time, walk up to the buffet with their masks on and point to what they wanted, and they would have a server serving them directly from the buffet. Reduction of formal table service. So here it's very popular to have a really lovely cloth or tablecloth on your table, and in many cases that has been eliminated. Actually, it's part of the Clean and Safe program to not have that available. If a restaurant wants to keep their tablecloths available to your clients, because that's kind of a really nice service to have, then they can only put the cloth out once the client has arrived to the table and has sat down, and they can see that the server's putting it out and the tablecloth hasn't just been sitting. So in addition to that, your plates and glassware cannot just sit on the table in anticipation of the client's arrival. Top 5 changes for hotel and gym and spa. Limited services available. So things that were available before COVID are completely roped off and not available. Gym used by appointment only. So limited number of people to be in the gym, and the equipment spacing, it matches the 2 meters apart or the 6 feet apart. Use of masks during spa treatments. So when you're in the spa room with your therapist, you're both wearing masks. Quarantine of treatment rooms after each use, which was one of the new procedures that I saw in one of the spas that I experienced, where they literally clean the room down after each client goes in, and then that room is not used for 6 hours or 12 hours or 18 hours. Each spa had their own protocol. And the different services such as Turkish baths, steam rooms, and jacuzzis are all out of use. No one can use those now. So ground transportation, rental car. And this was pretty straightforward. The rental car company was certified clean and safe. The rental car staff all wear masks whilst they're interacting with the clients. And a lot of them had like a branded gift bag with mask and hand sanitizer. I think I actually have, not sure if you guys can see this, but here's an example of what that looked like, which I thought was really nice. The tours and activities, which in my mind, when we go back to that pyramid, I believe that these are going to be the last to recover, right? Because I think that so many travelers, international travelers, are just excited to be able to get out of their homes and go to different safe destinations around the world, that perhaps they will even minimize their exposure by saying, you know what, let's pick a hotel or resort and kind of just stay put and not move around as much. So I think that tours and activities may suffer more than some of the other suppliers that we've mentioned. But I did try a couple of tours, and exclusivity is the new normal. So you see this picture of me on getting on a boat in the Douro Valley that's in northern Portugal. I was the only client on the boat. So if I were with a group, and that was kind of my family group or my friend group, and we traveled together, we could charter the boat together. But since I was by myself on the road trip, I had to be the only client. Clean and safe tour guides. So you see the young lady that's down in the lower picture. In her bag that she's carrying, she's actually inside of a museum right now with the mask on, pointing some things out to me. Her bag has all of these goodies that you see in the other picture right beside her. So as a clean and safe certified tour guide, she is keeping with her different things that she may have to use if a client were to get ill while on a tour with her. Water, snacks, sanitizer, hand sanitizer, masks, pen, paper, and also protective gear for the client to wear if they needed to self-isolate while they waited for the health department to come and help them, assist them. Also, a limited number of people in enclosed spaces, which is pretty obvious. Museums are not allowing the same amount of people as before. So these were the questions. What are tourism suppliers doing to keep everyone safe and healthy? We can now go back and answer that. Clean and safe has really, really, really helped to kind of create this national standard. What are the tourism products like in the more remote areas of Portugal? my response is unique and interesting. There are a lot of things that have not been on clients' radar before because they were kind of out of the more attractive city centers, but I think that now we're going to see a shift. Are other travelers respectful of the new health and sanitation rules? Yes, they are. I had no problems over the full 2 weeks that I traveled around the country by myself. I had no problems running into other travelers who were not respectful of the rules. So I was really happy to see that. How has upscale travel been affected by the new low-touch protocols? I would say that there's a new high-touch service, and that service comes by the way of things such as no surcharge for room service. So a lot of the hotels that I stayed in were before COVID, they had, a 5 or 10 euro per room service charge. They have completely eliminated that because they know that clients may feel more comfortable or safer having the food delivered to their rooms. So I think that we're going to see more things like this to kind of make up for the lack of being able to offer that high touch service that we are so used to and we used to see before. Is it fun or stressful to travel right now? I think it was still fun. It was a new adventure. It was exploring a destination that I already knew very well, but in this new environment with the new protocols and standards, and also seeing how other travelers react. So if you are adventurous, which probably people who will be traveling right now are, it was great. It's still fun. I'm ready to go again. Is Portugal ready to receive discerning international tourists? Yes, it is, absolutely. So if you'd like to keep up with all of the after the road trip information, such as articles that will be published and interviews and such, feel free to connect with us. And if you're interested in connecting with me, I am on LinkedIn and I am really approachable. So I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sheree. I think that was so insightful. Something that I think people need to hear right now, because I can vouch for the fact that we are craving to travel, but it's just a stigma that has been stuck with us with the amount of news and the amount of information that's been circulated. It's kind of scary to travel, but we know at some point we have to sort of get out there. We cannot stay and restrict ourselves. At some point, we have to sort of start to adapt, start to develop a sort of a mental immunity towards this particular concern. To the audience that's right here, if you have any questions, you can feel free to shoot. We're going to be talking a little bit about the trip and some bizarre questions that I have for Sheree about the trip, and some really deep questions. I'm going to be really digging her mind, and I want to know every single detail about the trip, And after that, we will be moving to a B2B sort of like a conversation where Sheree will share some insights about how businesses can promote tourism to Portugal, specifically to Portugal, since that's the context that we're talking in right now. And having said that, I would also like to point out that Sheree has an open Facebook page where you can actually take a look at all the memories and all the images and some write-up that she's actually put up on her Facebook page. Sheree, please feel free to share the link in the chat whenever you are
sure
comfortable. And if you could also share the video link to your promotional video for Immersa Global, is it?
Perfect.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think our audience will really like to see that as well. Now, let's get into some deep insights and some details about your trip. I am really curious to know some things. I'm just going to look at my notes over here because I've written down these questions. Now, I already asked you why, and I think a part of that has been answered. A lot of that is going to come now. I want to know, can you tell me a little bit about the travelers? Like, I know you already covered that, and you've covered that people who are traveling with you are super respectful and responsible about the health measures that have been taken. And I must say that Portugal has gone all out to ensure the safety of travelers. And I would really give it to Portugal for that. But did you ever feel like, as a tourist, especially hailing from America, did you feel a sort of a scrutiny or a discerning kind of an attitude and sort of like an inhospitality?
Oh, did we lose you? Well, while we're waiting to get her back, I'll start answering the first part of her question. Portugal, before COVID, was known as a very hospitable and welcoming country, and I would say that it's exactly the same, if not more so now. I never felt any hostility while I moved around the country. Many people aren't aware automatically that I'm American. Do we have you back?
Yes, you just right. Yeah.
Okay. So. And even if they did know, I don't think there would have been a problem at all. Maybe they would have had more questions about, how are things going over there. But everyone was very kind and welcoming and respectful of personal space, as that's a big concern right now. I did not feel any scrutiny at all. Perhaps, on social media, when we started promoting the road trip, there were some people who weren't necessarily in favor of someone traveling and promoting travel right now. But you know what? I felt that it was safe. I felt comfortable. I trusted the properties that I stayed at. I trusted the car rental companies. I didn't have a problem at all. And I was ready to do it. And plus, this experience has been such an eye-opener for me personally, and it also has been for all of Immersa Global's followers and our clients and other people in the travel community, to be able to say, I did it, it's possible, it worked very, very, very well. I highly recommend it if the country where you're in right now is safe, because of course it's a different context for different places.
Absolutely, absolutely. But at the same time, having said that, in the context of India, since you pointed it out, over here, the slogans of stay home, stay safe, stay home as much as you can are being highly promoted. And as someone who's actually gone out there, tested some waters, I actually want to ask you, is it the right time? Is it the right thing, in fact, to sort of encourage at this point, since we're so much deep into it in respect of time? Do you think it is the right time to sort of start to encourage little by little, baby steps, but start to encourage travelers to take the plunge and, sort of start to develop the mental immunity that I was talking about? Do you think it is the right time? How would you justify that?
Once again, I think that that's market specific. So, we won't have to go into specific countries, but if there's country A or destination A that has not dealt with this pandemic very well at all, and they're actually still dealing with the aftermath on a national level, I probably would feel a little less comfortable promoting that destination. In the case of Portugal, they've been on a very steady decline of cases. They've been very proactive about testing. They've made that available to all residents and citizens. So in the case of Portugal, felt very comfortable doing it, and also feel very comfortable promoting travel to Portugal, as long as you can understand what the expectations will be when you come as a guest right now, that you will have to wear masks. You will have to sanitize your hands before you go into establishments. Like, you can't even get in unless they see you cleaning your hands. And the things that I mentioned before about the dining protocol when you go to restaurants. If that offends you, then this isn't the time to travel. If that does not offend you and you're still up for the adventure, then by all means. So I'm not sure if I answered the question well. I just think that it depends on each country and how they're handling this situation for their own citizens first, which is the most important, and then what programs they've put in place to make their visitors comfortable and safe.
I think it's just like how we are going about our lives today, even like staying in India. It's just like that. I mean, wearing a mask, being constantly monitored whether they are wearing a mask or no, being constantly policed about it, is something that we're getting used to. We are accepting as a good thing, and sanitizing is, starting to develop as a habit. But I want to know, for example, like you said that the hospitality industry can feel a little bit, they won't be as hospitable, or because of the protocols that they have to manage, of course. That's restricting them. But I want to know from your perspective some behavioral shocks that you sort of, witnessed, some things that were different now, were a little difficult to adjust to right now as compared to when we used to travel before COVID. Stuff like, okay, this is new. How do I adjust to this? Was there any point in your trip where you felt like, okay, this is going to take some time?
One of the things that I noticed in the upscale restaurants, as I mentioned before, about the tablecloths, which is such a big deal, even for the Portuguese, to be able to sit at a lovely set table. That's a change that you have to get used to. Now the restaurant looks a little barren because literally they've gone in and taken out all just the extra stuff that could potentially be a source of contamination, right? That's one thing that you have to consider. Another thing is, if you happen to sneeze or cough, you're not sick, but you just sneeze or cough, now everyone's going to look at you. So that's a social thing that we're probably all getting used to in all contexts.
Yeah.
What I did notice, you can't see people's faces, because their entire faces, because their mouths and their noses are covered. So you miss that smile when you are talking to waiters. But they're going out of their way and doing extra things to make you feel that they're paying attention to you and that they're there to serve you. So those are just a couple of things, but it's not enough to deter me from wanting to eat out or from wanting to travel.
Oh, I think that's perfect, and something that we just have to get used to and, sort of overlook also, because not overlook, but just the hospitality with the welcomeness that people used to present, especially to foreign tourists, was something that we'll just sort of have to, kind of give up on, or not give up on, but sort of like reduce, like not expect so much of.
Right. Well, I think it's changed, if I may. I think that the way people express their hospitality to you has changed. So, when I walked into a hotel room and I saw a set of masks that I could use, disposable mask and hand sanitizer as my gift, along with maybe some cookies or some fruit that was wrapped up, I thought, oh, they're thinking about me, right? So I think that the way tourism suppliers can give that extra smile, since now we can't really see your smile, is by letting your clients know, especially now while we're still in the pandemic, unfortunately, is that you do care about their well-being and their safety. And so that's the most important thing. And of course, building consumer confidence is what we all as travel professionals need to focus on. So if you go back to that pyramid that I created with the different concerns, wherever you fit in whatever sector of the industry you're in, find out how you can help ease some of the stress or the concerns that the clients have. And maybe it's not, shaking their hand, or if it's not something that you're actually able to give them, but it could be something that you provide for them, a service that you have available for them.
There's a rumor going on. This is just like a random question. There's a rumor going on that people all over the world have resorted to doing, each other with namaste, and Indians have been taking so much pride in it. So I want to know if that's true. Like, are you actually doing that?
You're doing that in some places, and here in Portugal, what I've been seeing is like the elbow bump. So when you meet somebody, you can't shake their hand, you can't kiss them on the cheek, which we do in Europe. Especially here in Portugal.
You're pretty millennial.
Yeah, you kind of like just bump elbows with them. So that's the new handshake and hello. Or you do. I like this.
All right. With respect to what you were saying about all the changes that have come across in terms of exclusivity, where group activities are. As of now, when we're still in the transition process, group activities are little, kept, little not encouraged and stuff like that. Do you think that increases the cost of traveling by any chance? It does.
Yeah, without a doubt, it does. Go back to that that day experience I had on the boat. it was just me.
Yeah.
Versus having a group of 12 or 20 people that you can split the cost with. So yes, if you want to engage in those types of activities right now where there's still limitations on the number of people who can be in one space, then the cost has to increase. It wouldn't work otherwise.
All right. And having said that, you mentioned that you were alone on this boat. Uh, I want to know how the interactions with the other travelers were for you. Were they as smooth as they were before COVID? Uh, and how did you feel about it? Did you miss it, or were you like fine with it?
Right. So I am quite an experienced traveler, as I'm sure most of us in this conference are. And I do miss, I'm also an experienced solo traveler. So I do miss those spontaneous conversations that you have with people, maybe at a wine bar, or if you're sitting at a communal table, which now that's not an option. So it definitely has changed. And I think that the way people interact now is by being respectful of your space, right? Because that's our concern about being healthy and staying within our 2 meter or 6 feet distance from strangers. I think that's how people show their respect to you now. You don't sit down and have a random conversation with someone. That didn't happen at all. And a lot of the common spaces in hotels, like the lounges or the lobbies, you have to social distance. So with distance comes the lack of ability to just have a random conversation with someone. So I did miss that.
You did miss that, of
I
course.
did, yeah, of course.
I know how special these connections can be, even though not permanent, but they might like edge in your memory like for a lifetime. And
Right.
I know how special this can be. That's why I was really like curious about this, how it is now, the interactions and stuff with the
Yeah.
elbow.
So that was mainly with hotel staff or restaurant staff. Those are the people that I spoke with the most. And so I guess there's a silver lining, because I did have more conversations with some of the hotel staff, more so than I probably would have before. I don't know if they took pity on me because they saw me traveling by myself, which I think I was the only solo traveler throughout my entire 14-day trip. But I think that people are finding ways to compensate for what we missed about travel before. And this is just something we're going to have to get used to, and hopefully it won't be forever, right? As soon as we get a vaccine and we can start redefining our next phase of new normal, hopefully those social interactions, which is such a big, important part of travel, will come back.
Absolutely. Very, very true. Okay, let's take some questions at this point as just like a tiny breather. Okay, wow, there are a lot of questions. I'm not surprised. Did all the types of hotels and restaurants, both luxury and economy, had the basic services at same standards, or would it differ?
So as a disclaimer, I only stayed at upscale properties for this program. So what would be considered like 4 and 5 star properties. However, I do know that this clean and safe program that Portugal has specifically, and I think a couple of other countries are coming up with their own programs that are comparable to that. It covers all lodging. So upscale hotels, mid-range, budget hotels, and even Airbnb type properties as well. So if I would have stayed at a different type of hotel, I'm certain that I would have encountered the same type of cleaning procedures.
Oh. There's an interesting question over here by Anshul Kumar, who is Principal Management Consulting at Sabri Hospitality Solutions. He wants to ask you, what was your backup plan in case you contracted the virus?
That's a great question. And honestly, my backup plan was that was probably my only concern if I contracted the virus while traveling. My backup plan was just to come back to Lisbon. And just end the trip, which I obviously am very happy I didn't have to do. But it would have been either drive myself back. If I were too ill to drive myself back, then I would have come back somehow. Someone would have come to rescue me.
On a side note, actually, from this question, I want to ask you, what fears did you have, like when you were trying to sort of, in fact, let's go back to the day when you decided that, what, I want to do this. I would want you to sort of, elaborate and tell us your entire mind map of this entire journey that you went through while deciding, the fears that you went through, overcame, or just sort of, thought of risking it. Tell us a little bit about that.
To be honest with you, my only fear, and it wasn't a huge fear, it was if I were too ill to get myself back to Lisbon. That was it. If something were to happen during the program and I were incapacitated, if you will, and could not get myself back to Lisbon. Other than that, I've been very lucky to travel around the world by myself for 14 months. So I felt experienced, and I'm adventurous, and I really didn't have any other fears. I did think about, as I kind of alluded to before, how people would perceive this. I think during this time, we've all been very, very careful about, is it the right time to start talking about this? Or is this going to come across as tone deaf? I know that for a small group, this road trip, even now in July, end of July and beginning of August, probably did come across to some as a tone deaf move. But as I mentioned before, I was comfortable making that decision to do it. And if I've lost some followers or maybe even some clients, then I hope that I've been able to give value to those who are still with me and make new friends along the way.
Far so good, Sheree, I must say. I feel pretty inspired to go to Portugal myself. I actually had plans, with Vandita. I actually had plans to come to Portugal, but couldn't be executed because of the obvious reasons. Let's take one last question and then move on to a B2B answering sector. What was Kushal Jain asks, what was your favorite city with respect to the beauty and their preparation during such times? That's an amazing question, actually.
Oh my goodness, that's going to be a really difficult one to answer. So I must say that as well as I knew the country before, I feel as though I really know a lot of the second or third most visited places now, right? There were places that I had not been to in the north. It's such a diverse country to be so small. So I'm from Florida, as we've mentioned before, and my state is 2 times as large as Portugal is. So you literally can cover a lot of ground in little time. So can you imagine over 14 days what I was able to see? I love areas in the south. I was in this one area down in the Algarve where I started off called Sagres. And it was absolutely beautiful. And before, it was never really on my radar to visit because it's so remote. But within this context of looking for more remote places, it was perfect. So I'm happy that I got a chance to go there. I'm also happy that I went all the way up to the top of the country, to the most northern part, along the Spanish border to the top, to a city called Bragança. And that was a real treat. My hotel room, the balcony looked out over the castle of Bragança, which was so amazing.
I did see some of the pictures on your Facebook feed. If I must also include, I think everybody wants a little insight, a little bit of a peek into Sheree's Portugal trip. You must go visit her Facebook page. I was truly intrigued, and I have so many more questions, but since we have time restrictions, I cannot literally ask. But I'm glad we had the conversation yesterday where Sheree was actually, she told me all the little details I wanted to know, when I went through her Facebook page. And if you are anyone's looking to get in touch with her, please feel free. She will be sharing her Facebook page and her LinkedIn handle as well. Now, Sheree, let's talk some business.
Okay.
From your findings. Now, I know one of the objectives to go to Portugal was how you could sort of alter your model and your itinerary and imbibe some practices in your itinerary and stuff like that, based on all the changes that have, come across in your whole experience of traveling across Portugal. What would you say were your major findings with respect to the moderations that businesses should be prepared for if they want to travel to Portugal?
Sure. So we're talking about outgoing Indian travel agencies or outgoing travel agencies outside of Portugal that are wanting to send clients to Portugal. Well, the most important right now during the pandemic is to make sure that those clients will be willing to follow the safety measures that we have in place here. We have some destinations around the world where you have groups of people that are quite vocal about being anti-maskers, if that's a word. That will not work here. So if you're working with those types of clients, then this is not the time to send them here. Another thing that travel companies and outside who are wanting to send clients in should consider is that, yes, it will be more expensive to engage in certain activities that were probably readily available and easier to access before, for the same reasons that we've discussed already. I would probably also suggest that you may not be able to cover as much ground as you would have before. So what was the 10-day itinerary pre-COVID may look very different from the 10-day itinerary during COVID. We, of course, don't know what's going to happen once we have a vaccine. But for right now, if I had a group of clients that were coming in, I probably would only use 2 to 3 different properties max, right? Because, the hotel room is such an intimate part of the trip. You want to make sure you have the right property for that profile of client and that they feel comfortable and safe there. So, whereas before you're hopping around, maybe 2 nights here, 1 night there, 1 night here, 2 nights there. No, I don't think that we're going to see that during COVID. I think that's going to change. And maybe some of the F&B experiences as well. This was something very interesting that happened to me that I haven't mentioned. I actually ate more on property than I would have ever before. So I felt comfortable with the hotels that I'd chosen. I felt comfortable with how they were managing the restaurants. And it was just more comfortable to stay and eat there versus hopping in the car and going out and exploring. So I think that those are some things that you would want to consider.
Although, does that hamper your whole experience of having to eat local? In India, we have not just in India, I think across the community of travelers, we believe strongly that street food is the real flavors of a particular place. Do you think it hampered it for you since you have experienced, Portugal before and after? Do you think that was a little bit of, like a kickback?
The good thing about this particular destination, I completely understand why you're asking that in other contexts, but the good thing about Portugal is that a lot of the hotels, even the upper scale hotels, offer Portuguese cuisine, authentic Portuguese cuisine. So your price point may be different, that you're paying for the same dish on the property versus going out. But if you're comfortable, and right now that's the name of the game, that is the luxury, that is the high touch service, being able to provide people with that trust that where they are is a good place and they're safe. So I didn't feel as though I missed out on any gastronomic experience, and I love to eat. And I love good food and wine. And luckily, the properties that I chose were all able to offer that and authentic food.
I know yesterday we spoke about how you were going to, I know Immersa Global is already doing it, but now it will be even more beneficial for companies to sort of itinerate according to experiences. Like yesterday when I was talking to you about some of your experiences, about some wine tasting experiences, some historical experiences, keeping it very channelized, keeping it very experiential, instead of having to hover everywhere and, having to, like you rightly mentioned, having to cover maximum ground. I think that will be super beneficial for companies if they are able to sort of itinerate according to niches and according to various genres.
Right. Yes, I would agree with that. And what I also notice is that there are more collaborations amongst different suppliers, right? So at a couple of the properties that I stayed at, some of the wine producers in the area had their wines available there because they knew that clients would not necessarily feel comfortable going and visiting the winery. right?
Absolutely.
So that could be a future collaboration. It may be in India. It's not going to be wine; it'll be something else. But having your products or your services linked to where your guest or where your target guest will be staying. I saw that, and I think that that's a new model, if you will, that we may see more of, especially during COVID. Once things again are resolved and we have a vaccine, then hopefully it'll go back to the way that it was before, with whatever modification that we need.
Mm-hmm. All right. Sheree, do you think Portugal is really ready? I know you keep saying it's ready for us to go, for me to go as an individual, for me to go with some of my family members. But do you think it's really ready for mass travelers? Do you think it's really ready? Because if I came to you and if I told you I have a group of like 20 people who I don't know from some of my followers, and I want to arrange a trip to Portugal, what would your approach be towards making that trip?
That's a great question. I know there are legalities that are involved. For example, our source market is the US, and so we're still not sure if we need to have our clients get tested before they travel, or if they need to get tested once they're in destination. Who's going to be responsible if someone already comes infected? These are all the variables that we're still trying to tease out and make sense of. So whatever India's policy is for group travel, for outbound group travel, then we'd have to follow that. With regards to, is Portugal ready for mass tourism? A group of 20 isn't necessarily considered a huge group. The only issue or concern would be if everyone is healthy within the group. But what I can say is that I think that around the world we are reconsidering, or we are rethinking different models for tourism. I know for Portugal, at least before COVID, there have been talks at the national level of, how do we solve the issue of mass tourism? I believe that now and moving forward, there will be products available for all different segments. So wherever you are, if you're a budget tourist, mid-grade tourist or above, there's going to be a product available for you. I just don't think that right now we're going to see the huge groups of people that we used to see before, for the reasons that we've been discussing. In addition to the fact that logistically, it just will not happen in a lot of the spaces because they have limitations. You have to social distance when you go into a museum. There's no way around that. So I think we have a great opportunity to create new models and still keep products available for all different budgets.
All right. All right. So that's mostly about it that I wanted to come to, have a conversation with you on the business front. If there's anybody who has any more questions, please feel free to get in touch with Sheree. Now I want to ask you a little bit more about the trip. I'm sorry, I'm just so intrigued. I just need to know so many things. Now, from your Facebook page, I saw you have had some really amazing experiences. You talked about your first mountain drive that you ever done, and you were scared and you were thrilled. I know a lot of your wine tasting experiences. I know you lived at some really beautiful properties. Could you quickly sum up three of the most amazing things that you've experienced, and rather not have experienced it if it were not for COVID?
Right. So yes, my first serious mountain drive. I'm from Florida, which is a very flat state. I've been to mountains before, but I've never driven up them. So there was one day where my hotel was at literally the top of an almost 4,000 foot mountain, and some parts of the journey did not have guardrails, right, going up. So that was definitely a challenge, and I'm in my little rental car going up the mountain. Of course, this had nothing to do with COVID, but this was a personal challenge for me and something that I'll never forget. Happy that I did it. Once I got to the top, the view was absolutely amazing.
You had to drive alone, right? You had to drive alone. Yeah. If it were not for COVID, if you would hire a driver or something like that?
If I have hired drivers before in areas that I've not been very familiar with, and also when I'm doing lots of wine tastings, I usually have a driver for obvious reasons. But with this, the whole idea was to be able to do the road trip. It was a challenge for me, because I've been all around Portugal, but I've never driven as much as I have in this last experience. So that was one. The second one was Bragança that I mentioned before, that city that's like in the most northern part of Portugal. And the restaurant that was actually in the hotel where I stayed has a Michelin star. And I was so excited that they set a lovely little table for me out on the balcony, and my table overlooked the castle. And so this is like the most extravagant experience that I've had in the past 5 months. And it was just absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. So that's two. The third one, which is something that's near and dear to me, I got the chance to go down into the Coa Valley. So this is also in the northern part, but this is kind of northeastern, so bordering Spain on the northeastern part. I got a chance to go down into the Coa Valley where prehistoric rock art has been found. And I went down on a private tour with a scientist, and at night. So that was the extra element. It was amazing. It was so much fun to see prehistoric rock art, all these designs and drawings from our ancestors right where they drew them, thousands and thousands of years ago, and to have someone who's trained in it to explain it to me. So those are the top three. There were a lot more, but those are the ones that really stick out.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it would really stick out, though. Especially the cave one, like I said yesterday, I'm super intrigued by it. Okay, let's take some quick questions from the audience to conclude this session. I
see one about checkpoints. And if you don't mind, can I just jump in and respond to that? So how was your experience at various checkpoints during the road trip? Portugal does not have checkpoints per se, like we would think of in other places. When you arrive to a property, sometimes my temperature was taken before I could go inside the hotel or the restaurant. But other than that, you can drive around freely with no problem. We did have checkpoints. Excuse me. Let me just go back and make this one last thing. At the height of the crisis, the COVID-19 crisis here in Portugal, we did have checkpoints for maybe 4 or 5 days where we had a couple of issues in certain areas, and we just wanted to keep people contained to wherever their county was. But that hasn't been for quite some time, since April.
Okay. Let me just take a look at more of the questions. There's so many. People are so curious.
There's a question about budget travel. I think that we may have answered that one already.
Yeah, from a traveler perspective, this is a completely different way of traveling. Gurnam Jagota says, how important is it to share some of the information before you reach the destination and are aware of the protocols and changes? I mean, like a do's and don'ts.
So the question is, how is that information communicated? Is this B2B or B2C? I'm sorry.
This should be B2C.
Okay.
Travel enthusiast.
Right. So the majority of the hotels that I stayed at, they sent emails prior to arrival to tell me what the protocols were. So that was a way of them informing me, when you're on property, this is what's going to be expected of you. Of course, the restaurants didn't do that, but I was already informed on what the clean and safe protocols were in Portugal, so I knew what was expected of me. If you are visiting here, just as if I were to go to India, I would see, what is it that I have to do? Do I have to quarantine when I get in destination? If I do quarantine, what's that process look like? Am I to wear a mask everywhere? What's the restaurant protocol? I think as travelers, we just have to be even more responsible than we were before if we're going to travel right now during this special time.
Let's take a quick last question, because we have, it's time to conclude it, unfortunately, since I would love to talk more about it. But Sumedh Yavle from Trawork wants to say congratulations on winning the most unique culinary tour operator of the year by Luke's magazine. Food of any place speaks a lot about the people and culture. So with respect to that, could you throw some light on culinary tours and your motivation towards it?
Well, let me see what that last part was. I'm sorry, I missed it. What's the last part of the question?
it says that could you throw some light on the culinary tours and the culinary experience of the place?
Yeah, right. So that's a challenge right now. We at Immersa Global, we have not run any tours during COVID, and I'm not sure if we're going to, based on things that we've talked about before. It's a big challenge. So there's so much that goes into serving food right now and preparing a space for food to be served that I'm not sure if the experience would be the same. I wish I could tell you how to get around it. In the context of Portugal, I can't. I think it's going to be something that we're just going to have to deal with. Wine tasting, on the other hand, because Portugal is a huge wine producing country, was also modified, but because it's an easier service to manage, it was still very pleasant. So the biggest change was the glasses cannot be set out on the table prior to the client arriving. They have to be put in the client's view. They have to see them putting the glasses on the table. The wine can't be opened ahead of time. Sometimes wine needs to breathe, but in this case, you can't do it because it needs to be opened in front of the client. We're going back to single-use plastics, which may be a conversation for a different session at a different time. I am seeing a lot of water bottles, like single-use plastic, coming back, whereas before people would just be served water in a cup with water in a pitcher. So it's modified, and the food tours I think are probably going to be the last. So if we go back to that pyramid again, where I said that tours and activities were down at the bottom, they're probably going to be the last to recover because people are kind of just happy that they can just get out and stay in a hotel right now and maybe enjoy the pool or the beach. I think that within the category of tours and activities, food tours are going to probably be towards the end of that, which for me is a shame. For all of us, is a shame as consumers as well as providers.
I feel pretty hopeful about it because right now we're just starting to adapt. It's just like a transition that we are in right now. I'm sure once tourism and basically wandering for travelers and stuff like that is coming to more effect, people are getting more and more restless and anxious, and people are starting to get out. I think there'll be some really hard and fast regulations in place where it'll make these experiences possible, and for all the travelers. So having this conversation with you has been inspiring and hopeful. If I must say, envious too. But absolutely, thank you so much, Sheree. Unfortunately, we have only so much time, and but all this has been a power-packed, inspiring and insightful session. Thank you so much for taking the time out at 4 a.m. Is it? 5 a.m.
Now it's 7. The sun's out now.
Oh gosh,
it's 7.
All right,
okay,
thank you so much.
We have to do the bump. It was nice meeting you. Have a good conference, everyone.
Have a great rest of the day, Sheree. Thank you so much again. Thank you so much, Global Travel Meet. And yes, have a good rest of the day.